But there was a part of Natalie's story where you mentioned the father of the Asir family, as he just kind of said, your presence strengthens me. And I can remember the moment of being in their living room, and he had actually just gotten done, and this may have been the same time or a different time, but he was showing pictures of their home back in Afghanistan. And we're talking there, and he's sharing the story of how they ended up here and what they left, and he's showing these images of like these massive bullet holes in the wall of their home, and stuff just scattered across the floor, and the windows more or less just busted out, and I mean they completely left, just devastation. And I can remember having that conversation. Is like, how do you? And he's very smiley and happy, and just such an encouragement, just such a sweet man. And it was like, how do you keep smiling? Like, what is this? And it's that your presence strengthens me. But even in their stories, as we've learned more, I think you don't have to just live in Afghanistan right now to feel just the devastation that's going on. I think collectively as a culture, as people, I mean, we've been in a global pandemic for really what's actually probably like 2 years in and around this last week or two. Some sort of experienced that earlier, but at least here in the U.S. A world war, like actually feels possible. Since the last one, essentially. I think threat of famine was just talked about by our country's leadership in the last week or two. News articles and documentaries cannot come out fast enough to keep up with the failures in church leadership. Over and over and over again. Gas prices are astronomical right now. Like, I don't want to turn my car on, pretty much. Like, that's if I can find a way to do that, which I'm working on. There aren't enough counselors to keep up with loneliness and mental health from just all that's going on. And I think individually, this is a hard message because I know so many stories. And like, this has been the hardest year or two of your lives. In many ways and in different ways. And it might have been from failed relationships. It may have been from family cutoff. It might be a massive grief from loss. Just really career uncertainty, any type of social fragmentation you might be feeling. And if it's not you, like if you sit here and some of this stuff you just kind of don't feel, I think that could be okay. I also wonder, could you be closer to other people? Or maybe are you shut off in some ways to not be facing or feeling some of these realities going on? Because if it's not you, it's someone you know. And if it's not you, it very well could be the person that you're sitting next to who you don't actually know the depths of what's going on in their lives. So we're going to continue in our series this morning, Atomic Habits, where we're just looking at some of the patterns of Jesus, some of his rhythms and the life that he leads. And we're looking at it through the Gospel of Mark. So this is the story of Jesus according to a man named Mark. And maybe contrary to popular opinion, I don't know. I think here in the room we have a lot of people that are very aware of who Jesus is and what it looks like. But in case not, Jesus was not simply one who left others feeling positive and optimistic all the time. I would love that to not be the case. Right? I would love to just be able to encourage all the time. Everything's going to be good and everything's okay, and you just need to believe more or have more faith, whatever that is. But he doesn't always leave people feeling too optimistic, and he doesn't always look at culture at large and the culture around us very optimistically. Now, so I want to do for a moment, this might require a little bit of vulnerability, but I would just, for many of you here this morning, again, this can be hard because of the realities that you've been facing in the last year or two, and even today. I'd like for us just to pause for a moment, and I just want you to think over this last year or two, just for a moment, just reflect. And if you were assigning a number to this last year, one being like a personal hell, like this has been, I don't know if this could get worse. 10 being like heaven come early. Like everything is just top notch. Where do you land? If you think about this last year, what's your number? And then thinking on that, why? Why is that your number? And then I just want you to think about how you're doing today. Like right now, in this moment, however this week's gone, however you've gotten to this point, what's one word that describes how you're doing right now? In this moment, just one word. How are you today? And then why this number? Why this word? And now if comfortable, and it's honestly okay just to not, you can just not look at anybody in the eyes next to you and just avoid them. Or you can tell them, I don't really feel like sharing. That's okay. But it's someone next to you or someone that you came with, just share one or the other. Maybe what was your number, maybe what was your word. If you want to give any small explanation around that, you can. You don't feel like you need to. But let's just take, 1, maybe 2 minutes, and just whoever's next to you or around you, just feel free to just share that a little bit. What number did you sign? And or, what's the word? And if you want to give a little bit to that, go ahead. I know this can feel uncomfortable and vulnerable, but just really briefly, just a sentence or two, and then I'll bring us back together. Good. Go ahead and bring it to a close. This will just make you have to talk after also. You'll have to pick back up where you left off. There'll be more time to chat. Okay, so this morning, we're going to pick up in the book of Mark. Again, we've been journeying this for a few weeks. We have, again, next week, we're going to have Tim Getter with us, actually New Testament scholar, and we're just going to talk about the cross and have a conversation. You're going to be able to ask questions. It's going to be great. But this morning, we want to pick up, and really, we're going to pick up in Mark 13. What's been happening in the last couple chapters is Jesus has been watching, he's been critiquing, and he's been condemning many of the religious leaders. So the leaders of the church, he is essentially critiquing everything. I mean, this would be a very popular scripture where he goes in the temple and he flips tables. I know we love to use that one when we're mad at somebody. Jesus flipped a table. I can go do that too. Anybody? No, just me? Okay. So, there you go. Thank you. I'm not alone. Okay, cool. So anyways, so he's been doing this. He's critiquing, he's condemning, he's calling everybody out on these things. And then we get to this moment of, after all this hypocrisy and all these alienating practices that he's critiquing, it's pretty much all happening in the temple, in and around the temple, which I'll talk about in a sec. Not only was this their place of worship in Jewish culture, but it was more or less their identity. It was the thing that they actually knew themselves by. And in Mark 13:1, it says this: as Jesus was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings," referring to the temple. Jesus says, "Do you see all these great buildings? Not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will these things happen? And what will be the sign that they are all about to be fulfilled?" Jesus said to them, "Watch out that no one deceives you." Now, real quick, we don't have the greatest modern example of what the temple would mean to them. I was talking to Brian Ross at one point. I remember him saying this. He said, maybe the best way is to try and imagine your grandma's house, your church building, and some national monument like the White House. And if you kind of brought all of those together, that's what the temple, at minimum, could be to an early century Jewish person. And again, we do not have the same kind of thing here. But essentially, Jesus is saying, Everything that you find value, significance, and your identity in will one day no longer be standing. Everything that you are putting yourself into will one day no longer be standing. And not only will it not be standing, but there will be devastation all around them. Now, if you've been around church for a while, you may have heard the questions of people trying to figure out, like, when are the end times, and when's this going to happen, and what are all these things? And essentially, this is where you would get most of those questions from, if you just kind of do this plain reading. But if we actually ask some questions, and I don't think this is what Jesus is actually up to, but he does start to use these kind of things. He's saying not only is it going to come down, but then in that time, there's going to be false teachers. There's going to be war and famine. There's going to be earthquakes. You as Christians will be arrested and you will be flogged. Families will actually turn on one another, and that parents and children will actually kill each other. Everyone will hate you. Like if you continue in the ways of following me, not only is everything that you value and find significance is going to get ripped down, but then all of these things are going to be happening around you. Life as you know it is going to be terrible. There's even this one point, I don't know if I was going to bring this up, but he says in there, he says, it'll be extra hard for pregnant moms and nursing moms. And then he even says, hopefully it doesn't happen during winter, because then it'll be even more hard. And I saw these images of like Ukrainian mothers that are like fleeing with their babies right now, and their little children. And it's these kind of things happening in the cold and the winter. But what he's saying is there's going to be devastation all around you. And here in this text, if you aren't already feeling low enough, Jesus is using these metaphors and images communicating that everything you care about, that everything I care about, that everything we as a culture find value and significance and our identity in, the worst possible outcomes will play out. That the thing that you do not want to have happen very easily could and will happen. The things that you want to avoid with all of your being, unfortunately, are going and could happen. And my question this morning, if everything you are afraid of is going to happen, what would you have to do to be okay? If you were to think about the things that you want to avoid at all costs, the pain, the hardship, the hurt, the loss, if you wanted to avoid all of that, what would you have to do to be okay? Maybe another way of putting it, if your hopes and dreams don't come true, but everything you are afraid of will you be okay in your soul? Will you be okay? We're going to jump down to 32, and then we're going to go into a practice here in a moment. But he's talking about all this devastation going on, and we know that he's referring to actually the temple, which I believe ended up coming down in 70 AD. You can check that and tell me I'm wrong. But it all comes, this is the largest reference here. It is what he's actually talking through. And then towards the end, he talks through some other things that are going to happen. And he says this, but about that day or hour, no one knows. Just side note. About that day or hour that there's going to be mass destruction, that Jesus is going to come for the second time, that all these different things are happening, no one knows. So just in case anyone's been trying to figure that out, no one knows. Just in case you know anybody that's trying to figure that out, no one knows. Okay? Not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, Jesus, but only the Father. Be on guard, be alert. You do not know when that time will come. It's like a man going away. He leaves his house and puts his servants in charge, each with their assigned task, and tells the one at the door to keep watch. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know when the owner of the house will come back, whether in the evening or at midnight or when the rooster crows or at dawn. If he comes suddenly, do not let him find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch. Watch. Now, there's this really cool thing that happened. I read verse 5 earlier. I don't think I had it on the screen. But Jesus said to them in verse 5 at the beginning of chapter 13, he said, watch out that no one deceives you. And then he uses different words that have the same Greek word behind them. And then at the very end, again, he says, what I say to you, I say to everyone, watch. And in the middle, multiple times, he says, be on your guard. Do not be deceived. Be alert. And what's happening here is these two Greek words that Mark is capturing over and over again. These two on the screen here. Yes. And I'm not going to try to pronounce them, but be discerning and be faithful. Be discerning and be faithful. Be discerning and be faithful. When everything is falling apart around you, when nothing is going your way, when you don't actually think you can see a way forward through whatever it is that you find yourself in, when things are happening that you do not like or do not want, be faithful, be discerning. Be faithful and be discerning. And so I think what he's getting to over and over again, he's talking about discipleship. He's talking about following Jesus. When there's destruction all around us and we just cannot find our place in life or amongst other people, or just all the things that we never wanted to have happen, or just feels like I can't get ahead, or it feels like, man, why is everything happening bad right now? He's saying, be discerning and be faithful. And ultimately, I think what he's asking is, who are you becoming? When things aren't going your way, when you would rather change everything in your life right now, when you have certain circumstances that you cannot stand and you cannot wait to get through, be discerning and be faithful. Who are you becoming? I owe my wife an apology, which I have not done yet. She's here, so she'll get it publicly. Which is, I guess, better than the opposite of doing it publicly, right? That's a good thing. We should forget or apologize. Man, when I'm like in my head on stuff and overwhelmed and stressing and frustrated and this isn't working, like, who do I become? Well, I become very short. I don't actually engage. I'm very self-centered and will push people away. I mean, you just keep going down the list. I become someone that nobody wants to be around. And oftentimes, like many of us, the people who are closest to, unfortunately, probably maybe see the most of that or experience the most of that. And I would love for it to be the other way around. Love for it to not happen at all. But I'm sorry. These last couple weeks, the things that I have just been swirling, and I'm overwhelmed and I'm frustrated and this isn't working and why can't this get ahead and what if we just change this and God, why? Why? And when I'm in that place, when I'm not discerning, when I'm not being faithful, I just collapse inward. Some of us collapse, some of us conflict. We actually go against other people. We overproduce or we underproduce. It starts to actually change who we are. I think Jesus is actually saying, in all the things going on around you, who are you becoming? Because devastation is going to come. The things that you find value and significance and worth and identity are going to fall apart. Who are you becoming even in the midst of that? I can remember my first official pastoral position where I was on staff at a church, and I was a couple years in, maybe a little bit more, and I was just frustrated. Like, things weren't going the way I wanted them to. I was starting to find my own sense and call in things that were differing where we were at, and I'm underpaid and working way too long and all these things that are just chaotic going on around me, and I just, so many things are happening. I remember being in this, it's like a closet that we turned into this little office, and I'm sitting there one day all by myself in the building, and I'm just frustrated and hitting the keyboard and just, this sucks. Just not enjoying anything. And being just God, why? Why am I here? Why am I doing this? This is stupid. This is not what I want to be doing. I'm doing nothing, literally in a coat closet with a computer. Why? This does not make sense. I actually was a cool person before this, and I wasn't in a closet. What is happening? And I'm just frustrated. Or pausing for a moment, and it was just, I sit there and I could clearly hear God. Again, not this audible voice that shook the room, But he said, Ryan, I have something different for you, but not yet. I know this moment doesn't equate to like the depravity that we find in life and all of the hardship. But I remember that story because I wanted everything to be different. But what God was saying is, I have something different for you, but not yet. But be patient. Be discerning. Be faithful. And I remember a shift in my heart. This went on for another couple of years. And I just said, you know what? I'm just going to show up. This may not be where I want to be right now. God, I trust you. But who am I in the midst of it? Who am I becoming even though I don't want the circumstances that I find myself in? Can I continue to be discerning, figuring out what God is doing in the midst of these things? Can I continue to be faithful? Can I continue to become a person of love and generosity and encouragement and forgiveness when everything is going bad? Could I continue to become good? So in the midst of all these things, wherever your number is, whatever your word was, who are you becoming? And these are the messages that I don't like because I know most of your lives. Like I know the stories that you're in right now and the grief that's there and the hardship and the things that you're facing and the things that you'd want to change, the things that I want to see changed in your life. Like I know this. But the better news in that is that Jesus knows this. And this is the tension. This is part of the good news of who God is God himself entered into the flesh to actually enter into the pain and the suffering and the devastation and all the things that are falling short from what he actually has for us. And Jesus has come to say in so many ways, I have something different for you, but not yet. Who are you becoming? So if you think back over this last year or two, as you think back to this last week, as you think back to today, all the things that didn't go your way, all the things that still aren't going your way, are you more generous than you were than 2 years ago? Are you more quick to forgive than you were 2 years ago? Are you actually better at moving towards people who are different from you, even those you disagree with? Are you becoming a person of love and goodness and beauty? Are you taking on the character of Jesus, even when life is terrible? And sometimes we can be the opposite. Everything's going so well that we're actually not changing. Things are so easy and good, and I don't have many worries. But actually, like character gets produced in the fire. Like it's hardship that actually brings things out in us. And we have oftentimes a choice. Is that going to be a good thing or a bad thing? Who have you become over the last couple of years? And in the midst of it all right now, who do you want to continue to become? Who do you want to become? And Jesus knows this tension. He knows the tension you find yourself in. He grieves with you. He does not like the hardship, the devastation, the challenge that's being produced. I think he likes it in the sense that it's an opportunity to become more like him, but he grieves with you. It's a part of God's character. It's amidst the grief, the pain, the loss, the instability. Can we become people of love and beauty and forgiveness just over and over and over again? So what we're going to do is we're just going to do a practice. I'm going to grab a verse here that I'll explain in a second. And just going to ask you just to close your eyes and just to do your best to imagine that you're just like, I don't know, or maybe imagine you're in these confession booths. I don't know. But like just imagine you're just by yourself. You're still. So do whatever you need to do to get there. Might be closing your eyes, might be connecting your feet to the ground, might be opening your hands, might be taking a couple slow, deep breaths. And I'm going to ask you a couple questions. I'm going to ask you to imagine. I'm going to ask you to reflect. And just do your best just to like work through these questions and maybe hang on to some of the things that you're processing. And try not to just do it at face value, but actually ask God to highlight things for you. Something that you otherwise would not think or see yourself. And then I'm going to grab a verse from 1 Peter. What I love about this is Peter's in this story. Actually, all of Mark is oftentimes referred to that he got the account from Peter, one of the disciples. And Peter knows hardship. Peter knows what it is to actually fail, to mess up, to walk away. He also knows what it's like to write to a persecuted church under the boot of Nero. He was martyred himself. He was killed for his faith. So I think his words carry some weight. So slow down, eyes closed. What is the most difficult situation that you are facing right now? What is your biggest challenge that has you the most concerned? And why is that? I want you to do your best to imagine everything you are concerned about actually coming to pass. That your greatest fear materializes. And what might happen? Relationally, financially, physically, socially, emotionally, within you. If that comes to pass, what will happen? What will be the devastation? Reflect on that as in much detail as you can. Now I want us to reflect on some of the words from 1 Peter 1:6. Though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. Though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. Ask the Spirit, what might this mean as you consider your biggest challenge or concern? What comes up for you? Though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. Now, with eyes still closed, breathing slowly, I'm going to read this verse a few times. It gives a little bit more context than the one we just read. And again, I want you to continue to ask the Spirit, what greater good might come out of the situation that has you concerned? In his great mercy, he has given us a new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. In all this, you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. What what greater good might come out of this situation than has you concerned? Your biggest fear, your biggest challenge. Ask the Spirit. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. In all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that cannot perish, spoil, or fade. In all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. Why don't we stand together? Invite Ish and Rachel up. We're going to go into one more song. And yeah. Yeah, let's do this. Yeah, we're going to go into this song. I think Kathy will be at the connection table if you'd like to prayer during any of this. I'll also be over here on the side. I realize this message can stir some things up. Just the realities of life and what you find yourself in. Or maybe nothing stirred up, but you want it to stir up. Maybe that's the prayer. So let's just end with this thought from the book of Lamentations. It says, "The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness." The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. So I think there's a few things here that if they are new every morning, it tells me that I need to receive it every morning. That God is good. That God loves. That God is near. That God is with, even in the suffering. Even in the challenge, even in the devastation, even all the things that are getting ripped out from under you when you thought that was what mattered most. His mercy comes near over and over and over again. How much of it do you want? Daily. And it also tells me I need it daily. Need it. His steadfast love never ceases, and as great as his faithfulness. See, he's not saying, Mark's not being like, hey, come on, remain faithful. Let's go. Figure it out. Be discerning. Remain faithful. He's saying because your God is so faithful to you in his love, may you also be faithful. I know this can be hard right now. Receive my mercy over and over and over again.